Jules, welcome back to the show. As promised before the break, we've got the CEO of Asbestoswise, Josh Fergeus. Good evening, Josh. How are you?
G'day, Tony. Good, thank you.
Now, Jules, tonight we're going to be talking about this hot topic of asbestosis and who it touches. Before we go to Josh, John, who are the people that asbestos touches these days?
Oh, Tony, it's workers, it's handymen, it could be housewives, anyone that has been exposed to asbestos, fibres and dust, Tony.
Children too.
And children, it's anyone over the years from the 40s, 50s, 60s onwards, even into the 80s, Tony, that's been exposed to asbestos, dust fibres. At your home, at your office, at your work, in a factory, that's who we're dealing with.
Josh, your organisation, what do you do on a day-to-day basis?
Well, we have a couple of components to the organisation. We primarily run a helpline with information and resources for people. So they might be some of the people that you spoke about, John, people doing home renovations, people who've been exposed, people that have had a history within their workplace of working with asbestos. We also run a couple of support groups for people, so people who are actually suffering from asbestos-related disease or people who are bereaved and have had someone pass away due to asbestos-related illnesses or disease. We also do some individual support for people right around Victoria, so we speak to people about some of their individual issues, expose them to some other people who've had similar experiences that they can talk to and rely on for a bit of that moral support. And we do a good deal of advocacy as well with various levels of government around where we think legislation and local assistance for people needs to head in terms of asbestos and dealing with asbestos in Victoria.
John, your dealings with these sort of cases, they're pretty quick in the sense that once you see someone that's got the condition diagnosed, you've got to get to court very fast, don't you?
Yes, Tony, and look, the Victorian Supreme Court has got a really speedy trial system at work. We can make the application and get a speedy hearing. Usually you can be before the judge within 2 or 3 months. Yeah,
2, 3, at most, sometimes 6 months.
And and we do find that most of the time these matters do settle out of court, Tony, don't they?
They do, because of the cost and everything else involved. Josh, can I ask you this? Give us some examples of circumstances where you've had to go out there to investigate the incidence of asbestos recently at a school in Broadmeadows?
At Delos Primary School, I believe, in Broadmeadows, has just come out recently. There's been asbestos found on the school grounds, and of course this is a massive issue that's been of concern to parents and the school community. It's something that's happened before, it's something that will continue to happen. A lot of these school buildings, particularly in schools in lower socioeconomic environments, are really old school buildings, and so they contain asbestos, a lot of asbestos. And for us, the issue is how it's managed when asbestos is found, and that there's a really speedy response to deal with that and remove it to keep everyone safe in the school community as quickly as possible. And
Josh, you said it was found on the school grounds, literally on the grounds, or was it part of the walls of the structure? What are the circumstances?
There's been a bit of both, I think, Tony. My understanding is that it was literally on part of the school grounds, so it was unearthed. But I think that they now think that there's the potential that there's still some in some of those older school buildings as well that they need to investigate.
And we see this time and time again, don't we, Tony, of illegal dumping of asbestos?
Oh yeah, that happens a lot because of the cost of disposing of asbestos.
Illegal works and the non-disclosure, and simply, unfortunately, a lot of builders just literally dumping this asbestos in a rubbish bin.
Exactly. John, just on that point there, the asbestos under the OH&S Act and regulations, apparently you've got to keep a register of where the asbestos is, if it's in a workplace or even in the school. And you've got to have a register setting out where it is and what you're doing to protect people. So that you're basically saying to people, look, watch out for this and watch out for that. What's your take on this register, John?
That register does exist, but I've got doubts as to whether or not it's been complied with, Tony.
Okay.
And Josh will probably go on about that.
Exactly. It's so broad. I mean, every workplace is supposed to be keeping this register, and it's yet another requirement for people who are running a business or a workplace, and it's one that a lot of people aren't prioritising, as you'd imagine. So it's sketchy at best, I think.
And Josh, regarding the current laws in Victoria regarding asbestos, What's your views?
Well, we're currently in a situation where we're looking at new national legislation coming in around asbestos and the management of asbestos right across Australia to try and harmonise some of the laws between states and territories. We're very supportive of the legislation that's being proposed. It's due to come up in front of the Parliament in the next little while, and we're really hoping that it'll be passed. And what that's going to do is establish a national office for the safety and eradication of asbestos right across Australia, and to try and work across all state and territory jurisdictions. We've got a situation at the moment in Victoria and elsewhere where even across different local government areas, the way that it's responded to is different, and really that makes it very confusing for people. An issue that's already really confusing. They don't know where to turn. They don't know what to do.
John, sorry, Josh. The thing about policing this issue about asbestos, you said there's a lack of inspectors. So isn't that a big problem?
It's a big problem, isn't it, Tony?
It is. Because, I mean, if you don't have enough inspectors to go around to the different sites, no one's going to police anything, are they, Josh?
No, and you know, one of the other issues with this is the cost is so often on the individual or the homeowner in terms of this. I mean, you can pay for someone to come out and inspect your property and see if something you might think is asbestos is actually asbestos, or if you found asbestos, you can pay for the removal and the hygienist to come out and assist with that. But it's big expense for people in the household budget, and it's really difficult.
Well, John, the federal government is saying that they want to try and eradicate all asbestos by the year 2030. It sounds like a pretty big job, and it sounds a long way away too, doesn't it?
I don't see it occurring, Tony. Not at the current pace. No, I don't see it occurring.
Josh, what about the personal experiences you've had with individuals that have been exposed to it and have suffered from asbestos? Can you give us an example of one?
Yeah, look, we've got a lot of people working with us at Asbestoswise or who, in a voluntary capacity, that have been personally affected, and we've also obviously got several support groups for people. One particular gentleman comes to mind. He's a really dedicated member of ours, and he's been diagnosed for quite some time with mesothelioma. It's a really interesting experience for him and a really, really tragic experience for him and his family, knowing what's coming, knowing that that's going to be, you know, the reason he's going to die is due to
How long has he had the mesothelioma, Josh?
Well, I mean, potentially he was initially exposed and contracted it perhaps about 40 years ago. He's known for about 8 years, diagnosed about 8 years ago. So sort of in the process of looking back over his whole life and thinking this has been something I've been living with for all this time, and this is something I'm going to be living with forever, and when I go, that's going to be why. And he sort of knows pretty much the circumstances of how he's going to go. It's really challenging to the human spirit, I think, having to live and deal with something like that.
Viewers, we've got to go to a sponsors break. Stay tuned, because after the break we'll come back to this discussion about asbestos.